Guys, I feel like I've used the sentence 43 times already, but Mercato never stops. And today, new bombshell rumor has been coming out in the past 24-48 hours of Real Madrid player and French international Eduardo Camavinga being a potential high-profile transfer target for PSG this summer. And in fact, there's conflicting information about whether the club might already be talking with Camavinga and his agents. So let's try to untangle. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about the player and how he would fit into PSG. Eduardo Camavinga, like I said, French international, Real Madrid player, 23 years old as of November. He's a midfielder slash defensive midfielder slash left fullback slash winger on the right, on the left. He's a very, very versatile guy. Exactly what we like. No, primarily, in all seriousness, a midfielder. Question mark, I think, like, he sees himself more as an 8 and probably like has played better as a 6. So that's a little bit of a question mark. He's left-footed, which is interesting. And yeah, in Real Madrid, he's been part of their team since summer of 2021. So it's been like around 5 years. It's going to be 5 years soon. He arrived as an 18-year-old, really high-profile target for 30 million euros off of Rennes. He was already a French international at this point. And one of the big talents of French football in midfield. And I think to some extent he's confirmed his potential, but at the same time, right now he maybe hasn't reached the levels that we were kind of expecting for him. And so I think it raises a few questions. I think, if you think of the player story with Paris specifically, you've got to wonder like how our interests fit into this and how we're looking at the player, because it's not a new story. In fact, PSG was interested in the player even before he went to Real Madrid, and we missed out on him, which honestly, I'll say it, for me was a mismanagement from Leonardo back in those days. So if you remember the summer of 2021, that's when we did our superstar recruitment, when Messi arrived, when Donnarumma arrived, when Hakimi arrived, when Sergio Ramos arrived, when Wijnaldum arrived. And all throughout that summer, Camavinga was being talked about for a departure from Rennes because he had already outgrown the club. I think what was said back then was that the player's priority was to go to Paris, and he really wanted to go to Paris. And Leonardo all summer kind of made it look like he was trying, but obviously we were moving on other players, and I think financially it was a little bit difficult to just gather the cash for a 30 million transfer, plus make space for him in the midfield. And so essentially, the player waited as long as he could, and on the last day of the Mercato, ended up going to Real Madrid for 30 million. And at the time, I remember myself and a lot of PSG fans being absolutely seizing at missing out on a young French talent in midfield, which was an area of the team where we knew we needed more talent. And so yeah, it felt like we missed an opportunity back then. So the good news that coming out of this story is that obviously the player was interested in PSG and he's got some sort of interest, and that's really what we want. The bad news is that he went to Real Madrid. He's been there for 5 years. He's earning a big salary, more than what we would give him in PSG. Let's be clear. I think he's on 12.5 million euros a year, which, in PSG, it's basically like would be the second biggest salary in the club, just after Dembele. So more than Marquinhos, for example, more than Lucas Hernandez, more than like anyone else in the locker room. So that might be a little bit of an issue. In terms of player profile, let's touch on that as well because it's interesting. I said he's a versatile player, and I think it's a key characteristics of him. He's is one of those very modern midfielder in the sense of having a lot of physicality and intensity in his game, but also like technically and tactically being very sound and very solid as well. He can pass the ball around. He can like create with his feet and with his head, and so it's really interesting. But at the same time, he can also like get the ball back, be precious in more defensive situations, generate impact. So he's really the sort of full package midfielder that we tend to like in Paris. And from my perspective, I see him as a player who would be extremely compatible with Luis Enrique's game, in the sense of being able to play in different positions, having good feet and good techniques, but also like having a high IQ when it comes to the game and really high understanding of the game, good vision, and being able to fit into the mold and come into the team. And for 23 years old as well, he's an extremely experienced player at this point. He's got like, I think he's won one or two Champions League. He must have won over the years in Real Madrid. He was with the French team in the last World Cup in Qatar. He's seen things and he's done things. So at 23-year-old, we're not talking about a youngster. We're coming about like a referenced international level player who still has the potential, I think, to go one or two steps higher. I think that will be the question mark as well, because like it feels like in Real Madrid, he's kind of plateaued a little bit. And what we see this season is that through injuries, through like other players coming in first, he's playing about 40% of minutes available, but he's really not playing them as a starter, and he's really kind of a second choice, albeit a second choice in a lot of different positions, which ends up giving a lot of playing time. But it's also stopping his development a little bit, because at some point he needs to have a little bit of consistency in terms of where he plays and how he plays. And I think, he's always been a good team player, in, not shying away from covering in different positions, doing what he was told. But he's the kind of player where now he needs to settle in and really like get to the next level in his core position, which to me will be in midfield. And so I think, in the context of PSG, it's interesting because like I do see him, if he were to come into the team, and let's do a little bit of fiction, I do see him as someone who could give Fabian Ruiz a really like big run for his money. And I think that position between Fabian Ruiz and Camavinga would be clearly up for grab. And I think, there's a place in the starting 11 that could be his. Not saying that he's 4 steps above Fabian Ruiz. Big respect for Fabian Ruiz and what he's done, but he's also been turning 30. He's getting older. He's going to be renewing his contract. It's essentially done at this point, just waiting to be announced. But at his age, like the end is closer than the beginning, and having a 23-year-old already at the level of experience of Camavinga would be extremely valuable. And at the same time, Camavinga, he could be like the Warren Zaire-Emery equivalent on the left side, who can cover from Nuno Mendes on occasion when necessary. He's definitely at a higher level there than what João Neves can do. He's at a higher level there than what Beraldo can do. He's at a higher level there, probably than what a Lucas Hernandez can do, like especially with time passing. I mean, Lucas Hernandez has done well a couple of times stepping in for Nuno Mendes, but it's always a little bit touch and go. You never know if he's going to blow off his top, just get himself sent off after 10 minutes on the pitch. So Camavinga at least is a little bit more level-headed, I guess. And so you can count on him staying on the pitch a little bit longer. So it's an interesting move for given where we are with our squad. I think the question marks that I would have in that aspect is, where does that leave players like Mayulu? Where does that leave players like João Fernandes? Or midfield, I think like let's be clear. We've got like 4 international level players for 3 positions between Vitinha, Joao Neves, Fabian Ruiz, and Warren Zaire-Emery. That's 4 players who are at international level who play for 3 places. And then we've got 2 youngsters in Dro and Mayulu, and we've got offensive players who can play in this position if necessary, like Kang In Lee, like Doué, now even like Beraldo coming up from defense. So there's a few players who can slot into it. But yeah, bringing a player like Camavinga, that means 5 international level players for 3 positions. And so for a player like Mayulu, where we know we're negotiating to get his contract extension, that's not really a great sign for him. It's really saying like, hey, like either you're going to be playing in a false 9 or winger position, or in midfield, you're not going to have as much playing time realistically. So it is what it is, and we don't know where the conversation is at with Mayulu. But I think that's kind of my question mark in terms of how the squad is put together. And I think for João Fernandes, who came in looking at Fabian Ruiz's position in the long run, obviously he can play in other places as well, but that's a big name that be joining right in his space as well. So a little bit of a question mark. In the end, I think it's fairly interesting. And like it's fairly interesting in a way because like from what I've seen, French PSG fans are very much in favor of it, and international PSG fans are very much on the fence about it. And so like international fans are saying, yeah, could be a good idea, but how much would it cost? What would be the salary? Where would he fit in the squad? And also like, what kind of level is he really at? Because he's not a starter in Real Madrid. Even if he's getting quite a few minutes, like he's not in the starting 11. And so like, where would that put him in PSG's midfield? So when you think about it, like Real Madrid right now, like midfield is really like the weak part of their team. When for PSG, midfield is a strong part of ours. And we are the European champions right now. So you've got a legitimate question to be asked there. I think for me, what I would say is that like the rumor is saying that it'd be available for around 50 million euros, which I think for a player of this caliber is a fair price, to say the least, if not, a bit cheap. So I don't think the money of the transfer is the question. Wages is something that's a little bit more concerning, and ultimately it ties back with, I think, what is the important part, which is what is the conversation between the player, Luis Campos, and Luis Enrique. And that's a piece that obviously we're not going to have visibility on, but is the player really excited about coming to the point that he's willing to negotiate on his salary, maybe come down a little, put in more bonuses, and so on? Does Luis Enrique have a clear vision of how he can fit into the squad and how he can help improve the starting 11 or like the starting 14, 15 players that are rotating heavily and getting a lot of game time? And I think from a Luis Campos perspective, it's also like, what is the path forward that we see for this player? Is he someone that we're taking in as a sort of finished product already? Or is he someone that we're taking in at a slightly older age than Joao Neves, for example, or Warren Zaire-Emery, or whatever it might be, João Fernandes, but with a vision of developing him and getting him to the next level. Something that we've done with Dembélé, and it's entirely possible for players at 23, 24, 25 years old and above to keep developing, keep refining, and get to the next level of their games. So that's definitely an option there. And I think if there's alignment between those 3 parties and they have a common excitement and a common vision for how the player is and where he fits, I think I'm all for it, because he's an exciting player, he's a talented player, and he's someone that, would be adding some quality and depth to our squad. And I think for 50 million euros, a player of this caliber, who's French, who's always been interested in PSG, who's young and experienced, you take it. Honestly, it's an opportunity, you take it. So that's kind of where I stand on this. Just to close on, there's two different stories coming out from two sources that personally I put almost on the same level. So on one side, you've got Culture PSG and all of the Spanish media, but those are put to the side because I don't trust Spanish media in any way. But Culture PSG is a referential media when it comes to PSG in France. And they say that PSG is already in contact with people around the player and talking with them, and having had conversations already. On the other end, you've got 11 Mondial and Marc Méchenois. The journalist is a known follower of PSG, so I know he's got his sources and he's got his information. 11 Mondial is very old, used to be a magazine. It's a website, but historically was a magazine in the 90s and beyond in France. And so they say no, actually PSG hasn't been talking with the player, and it doesn't look likely at this point that they would move for him. So the ball is very much up in the air right now. Multiple sources say there is conversation versus one source says there isn't. Doesn't necessarily mean anything, but usually you've got to play the odds. So we'll see. Mercato never stops anyway, so we'll hear more. But for sure, it's an interesting topic that I think we're going to be hearing a lot about this summer. So this is what I had for you on the Camavinga rumor and whether he's Paris bound. Let me know in the comment what's your opinion. Is it a transfer that you would like for us, that you would like to see happen? And how do you rate the player? As always, if you've made it this far as well, please drop a like on the video. The thumbs up button is just below somewhere here. So just click on it, doesn't cost anything. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Hit the bell to get notified of future videos. And don't forget, for all your transfer news in English, ici c'est Paris!